Disappointingly, some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here reinforce this ridiculous narrative. One even suggesting that almost 10% of our uniformed military was extremists, 200,000 members. Ridiculous, by the way, from this committee on the other side of the aisle. Mr. Hegseth, unlike Undersecretary Call, you have a lot of experience with our military. Do you believe the military is a systemically racist organization? And if confirmed, will you commit to defend, not denigrate our troops?
Hello, my friends. J.R. Dukes at your service. Thanks for joining me once again. We are listening to today's confirmation hearing involving the nomination of Pete Hegseth. Now, he's about to respond to what you just heard, and then we're going to go into what I think is one of the most interesting parts of today's testimony. Wait till you see it. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Senator, I was also offended by those comments because anyone who's been on active duty in the National Guard, man, woman, in units, understand that it's fundamentally false.
By the way, there's 3 studies, to his credit, Secretary Austin put out one of them, that said exactly what you just said. Fundamentally false.
Senator, they knew it. Anyone who'd been in a unit knew it. One could argue that if not the least, one of the least racist institutions in our country is the United States military.
That's
Being
right.
a racist in our military has not been tolerated for a very long time.
One of the greatest civil rights organizations in America. Would you agree the U.S. military is one of the most forward-leaning, probably one of the greatest civil rights organizations in American history?
No doubt.
Let me turn to another one. Last year at a hearing before this committee, I called on the Biden Secretary of the Navy to resign because he's failing in his ability to build ships. We are being completely outbuilt in terms of ships by the Chinese, and yet this Secretary of the Navy has been focused on climate change, not building ships in lethality. Mr. Hegseth, if you're Secretary of the Navy ends up focusing on climate change more than shipbuilding and lethality, will you commit to me to fire him?
My Secretary of the Navy, should I be confirmed, sir, will not be focused on climate change in the Navy, just like the Secretary of the Air Force won't be focused on LG-powered fighter jets, or the Secretary of the Army will not be focused on electric-powered tanks.
I loved his performance and his answers during today's hearing. He was pretty well spot on. Very few mistakes did I see. And this part that we are going to look at now involves the Virginia Senator, Mr. Kaine. This guy is a real card. Now, remember, I want to preface this. We have talked about this on this channel. We went over the actual police report that he's describing, this alleged assault that he's going to describe. Imagine if you are Pete and you are in his position on the receiving end of these type of questions. And I have to tell you, Pete Hegseth's wife is in the audience right now. Can you imagine being on the receiving end of this? It's just incredible. Let's take a listen to it.
Senator Kaine. Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared?
Wouldn't you just like to smack the smug look off of that guy right there? What a clown. What a bozo. Look at that idiot right there. Unbelievable. Outrageous. Who would want these type of jobs knowing you're going to have some type of bozo like the guy on your screen answering and asking questions like that, personal questions, and his wife is in the audience?
Senator,
how is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017? You said it was consensual. Isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual and you were still married and you just had a child by another woman.
again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against me,
You no,
fully
wait.
investigated, and I was
You-
completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but
fully
you
investigated.
acknowledge that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath.
I would love to see somebody do a very thorough investigation on Mr. Kaine here. I believe this is the bozo that ran as Hillary Clinton's second for VP back in 2016. This guy's a complete bozo. How inappropriate. This is very reminiscent of the Brett Kavanaugh hearing where he was asked highly inappropriate questions. And it seems like they love to talk about sex. They love to make this as salacious and as difficult as possible on whoever they are interviewing in this process. It's just totally inappropriate. This should not be something that they're questioning nominees on.
You would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing
Amen.
divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
And by the way, these confidential settlements, these type of agreements, there's nothing illegal about these agreements. These are the type of agreements that are signed every single day in our country. They're very common, very normal, if you will. And the way that Mr. Kaine goes about this, he's trying to make it sound like he did something illegal. And of course he did not.
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase,
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
but you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us. And I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us.
And again, nothing that is not normal about that. That is a very common practice. People routinely, in the regular course of business, sign and have disclosure agreements or privacy agreements or non-disclosure agreements, to be more accurate. Very common, not unusual at all, not salacious.
Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO
I know
of
which
for
ones, but
America and
those
executive
two,
director
were
of
you
Vets for
fired?
Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I
of
was
them?
never fired from a
Do you have
veterans organization.
do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality.
They're not anonymous.
The letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record. people
We've
who've
seen
worked with me
records with
at
names
Vets for
attached to
Freedom, Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your
to me
one of
being
your colleagues
working
said,
hard every day
one
on
one-
behalf
one of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took co-workers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as
Imagine a ex-war Marine, an ex-war patriot like Pete Hegseth that actually went to a gentleman's club. Wow. What a shocking, shocking turn of events. Or that he was intoxicated at some point in his life. I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked at all. So what?
a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
I don't know about you. That bozo right there looks like he's had a few drinks in his lifetime. I'm just guessing, of course.
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career.
And he brings his mother into it. Oh my goodness. His wife, his children, the people he works with, and his mother. Oh my goodness.
That have talked about your abusive actions.
Chairman, I think
attitudes,
he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements
He's way
to women.
over his
I
time.
now yield.
And thank you very much.
Folks, this process is difficult. It's designed to be difficult. But at some point, there should be lines that we do not cross. When you start getting into someone's private sexual affairs and you start talking about their spouse and the commitments they've made to their spouse one way or the other, I personally think that is beyond the pale. That crosses some type of line. We should not be dragging children names into these conversations like this Mr. Senator Kaine did. This is inappropriate, highly inappropriate, and I'm calling it for what it is. Having said this, I think that Pete Hegseth did a fantastic job at today's hearing. It was a good hearing, and there's another senator that had a fantastic rebuttal to Mr. Kaine's nonsense that you just heard, and I'll be bringing that to you in another video very shortly. By the way, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm J.R. Dukes, your host. I want to welcome you to the program, and of course, I want to welcome all of my regular free-minded friends. Thank you all for being here. We'll just have to wait and see where this goes as far as the vote for Mr. Hegseth, but I think things are looking very well for him, and I suspect that he will be confirmed. Time will tell, and we will see. I always like to say, my friends, keep that mind free, never give up. Until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.